Hi, Frank.
Where are you right now?
None of your business.
Come on, Fletch. Aren't you bored?
I need you for a story.
As the lifelong owner of Confess Fletch,
Oh, nice.
my beloved copy, which I have read probably 10 or 15 times. I got to know Gregory MacDonald a little bit, probably the last few years of his life. He sent me a copy of The Education of Gregory MacDonald, his collection of journalism from the Boston Globe. And it was always amazing to me kind of how Fletch was very much like Greg, was very different from Greg, and yet at the same time he managed to make this career out of creating these characters who were representative of him. But it's interesting. He once told me a story about a lifelong friend of his who got mad at him during a tennis match. A guy he had known since he was 12 years old. They were arguing, and the guy said, "God damn it, Fletch," to Gregory MacDonald. And Greg said, "You really think I'm Fletch?" And I thought that was a fascinating look into sort of why this guy wrote these characters and how he got along with Fletch in real life and in fiction. And I sort of wondered, as you and Jon sort of got down to making Confess Fletch, this is certainly something that had been gestating for a very, 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 very long time. You know, how much did you guys begin to take Greg and his work personally and begin to understand that this is a guy who had seen his character translated to screen, obviously, in the 1980s, but not in a way that necessarily was representative of who the character was in literature?
Well, I have to confess that when Jon came to me with the project, I hadn't read the Fletch books yet. I knew they were beloved, and I do really like detective crime fiction, and I thought, why haven't I gotten to those? So I immediately went and read the first 6 or so, and I loved everything about them, and I saw immediately how they were different from the first movies. Jon had read whatever books were out at the time that the first movie came out. His story is that he stole them from a Walden bookstore,
Right?
Because he was so broke. But anyway, to answer your question, I mean, I started to think about Fletch in the different books and the picture you get of the character over the course of several books. And there were things about him that were a little elusive. He felt hard to pin down at times. And I wondered how much of that is I mean, there are consistent things. He's a smart ass. He's very bright. He's dogged. He strangely doesn't get flustered by things. He kind of just keeps pushing through even when he's wrong, which was something that's a big part of Confess Fletch. I mean, he's wrong a couple of key times in this course of the story. And I retain that concept in adapting it. But I think when I say elusive, I was wondering to myself how much of this is Gregory MacDonald, or how much of it is kind of extrapolated fantasy by Gregory MacDonald of, if I could move through the world like this, what would it be like?
Well, it's interesting, right? He's very much like Fletch. Greg was, in as much as that when he was a columnist, he wouldn't let the paper run his picture in the paper because he didn't want anyone to see what he looked like, because he wanted to move elusively through the world and not be more famous than the people he was writing about.
Yeah, which is very interesting, especially in a culture that people want credit for what they do all the time. It would seem. It's like one of the keys. An interview with him, he was thinking about when he was writing Confess Fletch. He set up a problem because at the end of the first Fletch book, he had absconded with millions of dollars from Alan Stanwyck, and he thought, well, what am I going to do with this guy if he's rich and he doesn't have to work? What's going to motivate him to kind of get back into the game of poking around, trying to solve things, get to the bottom of things? And I think Fletch has his own weird ethic. He wants to see justice done. He just doesn't have any faith in the institutions like the police or the judicial system. So he goes around them all to try and get to the answers. And I thought, and Gregory MacDonald said, he thought, well, I think Fletch doesn't care about money. He can walk away from it as easily as he can steal it.
Right.
It's not what drives him. And I thought that's such an interesting character. What he cares about and what he doesn't care about is fascinating. And it really, I found, like, I respected Fletch, the fictional Fletch, even when he's, not so legal in his actions. I respected that he really wanted, like I said, to do the right thing or see the right thing get done. Punched up, really, the people he really fucked with were usually rich jerks or power hungry people who deserved it.
Right.
And he liked outcasts and weirdos, which is another thing I embraced in this movie, which, the original Chevy Chase Fletch, and it makes perfect sense because Chevy's such a great comic. Everyone else is basically a straight man to him. He's like Groucho Marx tearing through the story, confusing
He's like
everybody.
Groucho and Harp. He's all the Marx Brothers in one.
Yeah, and it was brilliant and great. But in the books, you see that Fletch has different kinds of interactions with different people, and I had to think that Gregory MacDonald was very interested in people and humans, and very troubled by the injustices in our society, because all the books have a some kind of social satire aspect.
It's interesting. Michael Ritchie told Gregory MacDonald, "You're never going to like the movies that are made out of your books," and he took that to heart. And he knew from the get-go that these books were never going to be representative of the kinds of things that he wrote. But it really does amaze me how much Confess Fletch hews to the book, the themes, the characters, a lot of the beats in a lot of ways. Obviously, Roy Wood is not playing Flynn because, if I'm not mistaken, Flynn has different character rights that were sold separately than Fletch, right? You can't have Flynn in the book.
I mean, I think maybe if Miramax, who was financing this, was willing to pay a lot more money, they maybe could have, but there was, they felt like it was, for whatever reason, the Fletch curse scared them off from spending too much money. And, so it was a shame. Although when we made the decision, we didn't really have the money to make it a period piece. And it also, I felt like some of the social satire that was in the book was very biting and funny and interesting for the time it was written, but wouldn't necessarily translate now.
Right.
Not that I would have loved to have made a period piece version. In an updated version, it would have been hard to make Flynn make any sense in the 2020s because there's all backstory and
Well, plus the fact is, you and Jon basically helped finance the making of this film so much because you guys wanted to make this so much. I mean, Jon obviously put a significant amount of money into the making of it. It's something he'd been wanting to do for a long time. I know you did as well. I'm always fascinated by when guys, this is obviously for years, whether it was, any number of filmmakers and any number of actors have been attached to this over the years. Gregory MacDonald certainly never held out hope that there would be another movie based on the book, given that obviously Fletch Lives inexplicably was not based on a Fletch book. But it's interesting to me how much this was a passion project for Jon. And it seems to me that in a lot of ways, it became very infectious for you in terms of how much he loved it and then how much you took to it and made it something of your own as well, in terms of putting your own money into it and certainly taking over the writing of the film. I expect that that's something you did not necessarily expect to do at the beginning of this.
No, and it was interesting because the original writer, he was involved before I was, and he's a very talented, great writer. And there's many funny things in the script that he wrote, but his first draft really felt like a draft for Chevy. And he was very heavily influenced by the first Fletch movie. And I understand that, but Jon and I had said we want to capture the tone of the book as best we can. And Jon didn't want to do a Chevy impersonation. So when I took over the script, I kind of threw away the whole plot that was not that close to the book and went back to the book and started all over again. And I really was, I was very enamored with the book. And I had the other books floating around in my head too. It's it's a fascinating character, and I kept asking myself, why now? Why would this character mean something now? Because in the in the 70s, it was kind of someone who was that irreverent and distrustful of authority was a kind of zeitgeisty type.
Sure, Elliot Gould would have played him if you had made these movies in the 70s.
Exactly. I was thinking of, and I rewatched Elliot Gould playing Philip Marlowe in The Long Goodbye, and that pissed off people, but I love that movie, and it's
one of my favorites.
Yeah, and it's a great update of that character. What's interesting is that between Humphrey Bogart playing Philip Marlowe in The Big Sleep and Elliot Gould in The Long Goodbye is only 27 years, and it's been 37 years since the first Fletch, and we live in a culture that won't let anything go, post Jaws. But it's, we thought we're not going to do a nostalgia thing. We're not going to use the music from the original. A nostalgia thing might be more commercial, but it just didn't seem that interesting to us.
Right.
So where am I going with my rambling? What was your question?
how you became enamored of it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I did. I mean, I always did love detective stories and detective movies, and so I liked that aspect of it. But I really got into this character, and I thought, how does he fit in now? And I thought that we live in a world where so many problems exist and no one can solve them. We're just so entrenched in bipartisan politics. I won't say which side I think is more intolerant and unreasonable, but I'll just say for a lot of us, we look at the world and think nothing can get done. And I think Fletch is kind of a fantasy of a guy who gets things done. Most of us like to think we wouldn't break the laws quite as easily as he does, but when he does, I mean, there's certainly a part of me that thinks like, yeah, I'm okay with that. He can, he's trying to find these paintings for this guy and his daughter, and he's trying to solve a murder he's been accused of, and he goes about it in this incredibly nonchalant manner, but he doesn't ever give up, and he's not afraid to just keep poking his nose where it doesn't belong.
Right.
And I think these are qualities. I think it's aspirational to think you can actually solve something in this, and the correct person would go to jail.
It's interesting to me in going back and watching the film, though. Chevy's name has come up a few times here, and certainly when I was in high school, I had the Chevy Chase, the Fletch poster. I've seen the movie 100 times. I've seen the trailer recut for Confess Fletch, where somebody's gone in and put the Harold Faltermeyer music in. And
I haven't watched that yet.
I assume you've seen it.
I haven't seen it. I do have to watch. I want to watch it. Yeah, I'll probably watch it and think, yeah, maybe we should have used the music.
It doesn't not work. I'll say that. But it's interesting, right? Because there are the moments in the Chevy Chase film where he's not doing the characters. He's not wearing the false teeth. He's not wearing the robes and the wig. And there are these weird moments where you're like, I can see where there are some of Gregory's Fletch in that. And you sort of wonder, you sort of do in those smaller, quieter moments, see it as a companion to Confess Fletch, which is interesting to me because, I'd never expected to see them of a pair, given the fact that Chevy had played it so broadly in so many places. Yet there are the moments with Frank in the newsroom. There are the moments with Gina Davis. There are some moments where he's, with Mrs. Stanwyck.
Yeah, I love the scene when he's confronted by the lawyer who's trying to collect alimony from him. That's a really poignant scene, and Chevy plays it very straight, and you feel for the guy. You feel like, he's got this past with ex-wives, and there's a price to pay for the way he lives his life and the way he conducts his investigative journalism. There are things in it that I think I completely agree, where Chevy is the guy in a great, subtler way.
Did you see them of a piece? Did you see Fletch and Confess? Certainly they're not. It's the same character, same book, in the same order in which Gregory had written them. But obviously there are memories of Fletch that one has that are the one-liners that are not necessarily the things that Greg wrote or the character that he created. And I sort of wondered, as Jon and you talked about this character for which he was incredibly passionate, and not wanting to make something that was nostalgic and not wanting to make something that was an homage to something that had been played long ago by a guy. I sort of wonder, how do you find that? Do you find a connection, or do you eschew the connection in order to create this own separate individual thing?
Well, I thought, I mean, I lost a lot of sleep over the very question you're asking, because I didn't, because I do really love the original Fletch movie, particularly the first one, and because of the connections, the things that when I finally read the book, I thought, oh yeah, they took that and used it, and it's great, and Chevy really nailed it. So we didn't want to lose the irreverence. Knowing it's a movie and that got to keep people's attention, we filled it with more jokes than the scenes necessary were in the original. So it's jokier than the novel, but I feel like anyone sort of translating it would probably end up there, because the novels are laugh out loud funny. It's just a different experience, obviously,
Right.
reading a book. And there were times where John would do a line and I would hear Chevy's line reading in my head. I would imagine this is how Chevy would have done that line. And I would sometimes say, try it again drier, or throw it away more, or be more of a dick. And other times I'd say, no, we're not making that version, and I should be careful not to try and push John to replicate Chevy. But it was hard for it not to seep in at all.
Yeah.
And on top of that, we snuck in a couple of, we consider them tributes to the original film. Obviously the Lakers hat that John wears for the movie is something that came from the Fletch film that's not in the book.
Right.
The love of the Lakers. There's one pretty stupid joke that I had in there, but we had to take out for money reasons, which is when Fletch is sneaking around the garden party at the yacht club, the clam bake, the band at one point is playing Moon River, which ultimately Miramax said we can't afford it, so I had to take it out. But for those who remember the use of the song Moon River in the movie, it involves a medical exam. I'll leave it at that.
Right.
And
the Emmett Walsh doctor's visit.
Yes, yeah. And Emmett Walsh was great in the movie. And then there's one line at the very end, I don't know if you caught it, but Kyle MacLachlan says something that is almost a direct copy. It gives a little too much away if I say what it is, but he says something that's a line from the original movie,
Right.
Which was John's idea. John wanted that because he said,
really?
I just want something in here that's that is in there for the people who love the first movie, and people have noticed it. Real Fletch movie lovers. But we didn't want to steal. We didn't want to steal him having funny names and stuff like that.
Sure, you don't want to do that. You don't want to reference the Underhills. You don't want to do sort of these really,
I probably would have referenced the Underhills, but in the novel they're called the Underwoods.
Right.
And there was an Underhills line, and Miramax lawyer said you can't use it because that's from the movie. So I don't have that much self-control, Robert, is what we're saying.
Well, it's fascinating to me, right? Because you sit there and watch this, and it is fascinating to me. It is, we sit here talking about The Long Goodbye. This is, I think the reason I love the movie so much is that it is reminiscent of the book that would have been written in 1976, right? This is very much a movie that feels like a book that was written in the 1970s. This is something that captures the vibe of what Gregory was looking for, the character that he was looking for. It's funny, having gone back and reread the book a couple of weeks before I saw the film, and even just looking at it in these yellowed pages from this copy that I've had for 40 years, it is really interesting to me to sort of feel like I'm this movie is of that particular moment, though it might have been made just recently. And I sort of wonder, and I begin to be sort of really get excited about, well, what's Fletch's fortune going to look like? What are these rest of these books? And I certainly hope that you guys get to make them. And it has been an interesting rollout, right? Because, we're obviously talking it, Bill Block set this up. We've got the auction upcoming here. Bill helped get this film made, get this film distributed.
Bill
and it's
was,
sort of,
yeah,
what,
Bill, this wouldn't exist without Bill. He really stuck by it at times when I think people are telling him to let it go, that the Fletch curse cannot be overcome.
right. I mean, it just seems like it's just so many, it's a confluence of so many things that led to it getting made, how it's being distributed, how it's getting released. Obviously, I think the auction here launches the same time that the film premieres on Showtime. So that's certainly very, very beneficial for all of us, because I'm eager to make sure that more people see the film. I still can't believe that friends of mine who loved Fletch or who loved the books haven't seen the film or haven't heard of the film because it's not playing in a theater near their house, but they can watch it on their television now and going forward. You've not had an experience like this in terms of getting a film into people's hands, as it were, right?
No, I mean, the movie business theatrical has changed so radically. I think this was kind of an experiment for Paramount, and this was released by I forget what they call it. It's like their home video division, essentially. The theatrical release is kind of just a marketing bonus, but it's it ain't what it used to be.
Right.
And so it is a strange position to be in. I am very grateful that at least in the world of social media and some critics, the film is liked and has actually become sort of a talking point about what is, does the medium small movie have a chance anymore? Especially comedies. I mean, certain genres like horror seem to be still raking in a lot of money, but this is, intentionally was directed at an older audience. It wasn't, we could have put in more humor, more scatological jokes, and I certainly am guilty as anybody. But we just didn't want to. We didn't think that was the book. We didn't think that was the tone of the. The books have sex. They're not asexual, but.
No, we actually had sex with Marcia Gay Harden's character in the book.
I know. We had a long discussion about that, about whether or not that should happen, because it's a slightly pruder time than it was when the book was written. Is that the correct word? And so, so it's a weird way to be trying to get the word out, but we thought it would probably go straight to streaming or a cable channel anyway. So these are a few little launching points before that happens, and I hope it's enough. I hope, there are enough good reviews, enough good word of mouth that people see it and it makes them want to finance Fletch's fortune.
You're writing that, correct? Or you've been, at least Bill has hired you to write that?
Yes. So I've started to take a lot of notes.
Is there any better time to release a movie set at a journalism conference than right now?
Well, that's why I thought that, that book has to be, we live in the moment where, I'm going to try and interview as many journalists as I can, so I can learn what I don't know. But it's kind of a really fun prospect to write about that.
Well, I will say that Fletch was one of the reasons that I became a journalist. It's weird, the books, not the movie. When I became a journalist, certainly the Fletch books and poster followed me around for way too long in my life. I actually have a picture of me in my journalism room at high school with the Fletch poster behind me. So it's certainly been a big part of my life for a very long time. I never would have imagined an auction of items from Confess Fletch would be the thing that brings me to talking to a filmmaker finally about making another Fletch film. But such is the modern film business in which we find ourselves, right?
Yeah. Strange path we all take.
It is. It's very, very circuitous, but it brought us here nevertheless. Look, I know you have other things to do. I know you're in the middle of shooting a pilot. I have a million questions about Fletch, not to mention the rest of your career. But the fact is, it's a hell of a movie, and I'm glad to see that people.
Oh, thank you, Robert.
I'm glad to see people are recognizing it. Certainly, It's funny, you see that Daily Beast piece, you see the Rolling Stone story, you see the reviews it's getting, and you realize that in a couple of years, everybody who doesn't know about Confess Fletch will have seen it a couple of times by then. It does seem to be one of those movies that will live long, long after after we sit here talking about it.
That would be nice. I mean, I guess sleepers do exist in their own way still. My goal is always to make a movie that the people who are going to appreciate it the most, I make it for them. I know that the style of this movie is going to lose some people, and there's some people who won't accept anyone besides Chevy in that role, and that's fine. But those movies exist. They can watch those anytime they want. And it's nice that some people who went in thinking, I don't know if I'm going to be able to like a movie without Chevy in this role, found that they liked it. So it's pleasing.
Well, what they're getting is just Chevy without the gags. You're the wig, the stick. You're getting Jon doing Fletch. When Chevy did Fletch, it's very much like when Jon does Fletch.
Yeah, Jon's a funny guy.
Jon's a very funny guy. It's nice to actually see Jon get a movie that he does, that is as good as he is.
Yeah.
Which is probably why he was drawn to Fletch to begin with, because he saw in Fletch the career that he could and should have.
Yeah, I definitely thought this is something Jon will be great at, and I know him well enough to know that not everyone realizes how good he'd be in this.
Well, it's funny, right? Because everybody else who've been approached or have been circling it for the last 30 years is somebody who was just going to do a Chevy impression.
Yeah.
And Jon decided not to do that, and obviously you guys chose wisely. So, hey, man, I really appreciate it.
Robert.
Thanks.
Me too. It was a pleasure. It's great to talk to somebody who knows the book so well. I'm really enjoying rereading Fletch's Fortune. It just puts me in a great mood. So
Fletch's Fortune is my favorite of the books.
Is it? It's so terrific.
I mean, it's funny. All these years I've been waiting for Confess Fletch, and now I hope I don't have to wait a couple of years for Fletch's Fortune. Like, I'm really eager. Like, I was hoping you guys would have shot them at the same time, just to be like, all right, we're ready to go.
I wish, yeah.
If you need money, let me know. I've got a few.
I may hire you as a consultant since you know the book so well.
I got to tell you, these are. Gregory MacDonald is one of my all-time favorite writers. Not just the Fletch books. His journalism was incredibly important to me. He's an underrated journalist, undervalued journalist. So the guy knew what he was talking about. A great advocate for civil rights, for women's rights. Just an incredibly powerful columnist and writer. The Fletch books are certainly the best known thing that he's done. So it's nice to meet somebody who took the care that he deserved. So
that's a very kind thing for you to say. I really, that was important to me, so I hope it's felt in the movie.
Well, I told you this on email. You've directed some of my favorite things, for some of my favorite undeclared episodes, and certainly The Day Trippers and Superbad, which is another film that holds up every 6 months that I choose to watch it. So
bless you, Robert.
You're a good man, sir. So it's I'm glad that I had the opportunity to chat with you.
The pleasure is mine.
Thank you, sir.